think they're talking that they see with that whole family sports center and stuff, making some sort of an outdoor recreational thing that could be even more
That
expansive.
sports center property is owned by.
Oh, is it?
All
It's
that
operated by
clear down-
South Suburban.
Clear down to the street. That's all.
Doug and Deb.
South Suburban leases all of it, rents all of it.
Just so you guys know, I got called tonight. We got another Fine Arts Committee member who's in the process of resigning. No.
Who?
We're gonna break this up, Bruce.
Carol and, yeah, I know, kidding. Maybe they're all mad at me. Carol and Ackley, one of the new hires, or new appointees.
Then I say we have Wendy go back to
We only
We've
got
got
two,
two
you got
left.
two left,
two left.
Kathy and.
Do they have to, how much do they have left? Are they asking us to bring in another one?
I haven't talked to Dixon. She was gonna call Dixon tonight and have the conversation. with
Yeah,
him.
I think we,
Well, yeah, but they won't get the,
Council.
We're meeting
You have the
Thursday.
agenda in front of you. I'd like to add an item to the agenda.
What agenda?
This one right here.
Executive session
Like is a little strong.
for client attorney information. Deb,
do I read it now?
please.
Are we on TV?
We are on session and
Okay.
on TV. Yes, we are.
I'd like to do that at the 7 o'clock.
The 7 o'clock meeting is after the 6 o'clock meeting. We're in session now.
Okay, but we should announce it.
I move that city council convene an exec session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402, paren 4, subsection F, for a personnel matter,
For client attorney
for client attorney privilege, advice,
negotiations.
and negotiations immediately following our budget meeting this evening.
Second.
Thank you. The item C on the agenda. Discussion? Take by votes. All in favor, raise your hands. That's
Jose
unanimous.
voted twice. He's cheating again.
All right.
Getting
Now.
down, I gotta get all the votes I can in.
Our first one is Mr. Long.
Here we
Jim,
go.
you want to do the set of questions, the whole set of questions?
I can do that.
And then Phil, do you want to do the set of questions for the next one?
I will do that.
And Jose, do you want to do the questions after that?
Try.
And then Bruce?
Are they in Spanish? See, see.
Hold up.
What if you start reading them in Spanish? What would happen?
I should read them in German.
This is the hot seat? Okay. Sorry, maybe this is the hot seat. Yes, that's where the light shines. Thank you, Bill, for being interested enough, and educated enough to come down and interview and apply for the position.
And just why are you interested in being on the on the licensing authority?
I have always been interested in community. Right now, I'm Scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop. I've always been interested in giving back. I spent 27 years in the military, active in reserves. And I've always just been interested. I love Littleton, and I figured this would be a small way to give back.
Okay, and what kind of skills do you think you'd bring to the licensing board?
Well, my job, I'm a professional. I work financial areas, and my job is I'm a problem solver, and I seek solutions. I work with people, I find solutions, and I discuss things. I try to find common ground.
The council has an attendance requirement. They meet the second Wednesday of every month. Is there a problem with you being able to attend the monthly meetings?
Nope, our Boy Scout meetings are on Monday nights, and sometimes Thursdays, but Wednesdays I'm typically free.
I don't think they have very many special meetings, but they usually work that out, I think, among the members before they set up a date.
Okay.
So, what about being on television? Does it bother you to be on television?
No, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Because you're on television right now, by the way.
I kind of figured that.
Just thought I'd spring the question before I told you
Explains the bright
that.
lights.
Do you have any conscientious objections to drinking or the use of medical marijuana?
I personally drink. I enjoy wines and liquors. As far as medical marijuana, I don't personally use it, but I respect a person's right as long as within the confines of the law and it's been prescribed through normal means, yes.
While we're on that same topic, what's your feelings about the limit of the number of establishments in each of those cases?
Well, one thing that we liked about Littleton is it's very family-friendly. And I think that in order to keep it family-friendly, you have to find a kind of the right balance that people won't, if you had too many liquor licenses, maybe that would be too much where the families wouldn't come in. So you just have to find the proper balance and maintain that proper balance so that everybody feels welcome.
And what about the marijuana dispensaries or centers?
As long as there's a need for them and there's a market for them, and there's a justification for it, then I would consider that.
You may or may not be aware, but the council set a limit on how many we can have of marijuana dispensaries or centers in the city and established that at 4. And they are all still operating. Matter of fact, we may still have a 5th one operating if the lawsuit hadn't been settled yet. So,
Yeah, I think I know exactly where the 4 are.
Uh-oh.
that bode well, Bill.
Shopping?
All to the community.
Would you comment on your ability to be fair and impartial and limit your decisions to the evidence that's going to be presented in hearings?
I can tell you, being Scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop, that's very applicable because a lot of times you get parents that come in and say, what about my boy, this happened, this happened. And you have to be fair, you have to be objective all the time. You have to be consistent. That's the most important thing is you have to be consistent in your principles and how you act and how you direct and how you make your decisions. As long as you maintain consistency, it's easy to justify your decision, it's easy to explain your decisions.
Are you in law enforcement or do you have any interest in a bar or a restaurant of any form?
No, I have friends who own restaurants. I've always been fascinated by the industry and the business, but I don't have any interest, financial or otherwise, in any restaurant or eating establishments, anything like that.
The last question I'll ask is, sometimes there's a question come up in a hearing before the authority about stipulations. Do you have any comments about whether they should or should not?
You mean stipulation as far as getting a license granted?
Or primarily because of a license violation?
Oh, yeah, I think it would be very important if they do have a license, whether it's liquor or the medical marijuana, if they have a license, they have to live by the rules of the license. And if they've done something that would either result in either a temporary or permanent suspension, yeah, I'd try to be very fair and look at it, all the facts in the case and hear all the evidence and arguments.
Counsel, I don't have any other questions. Does anybody else want to?
Just want to clarify maybe your last question. Essentially, what we've had issues with on the stipulation is if somebody's come in for a violation and has to appear before the licensing authority, there has traditionally been an opportunity to stipulate to the facts of the case and basically save attorneys' fees and time and so forth and so on in terms of rehashing the facts of what actually transpired that led to the infraction.
Oh, okay.
And then the question ends up being is how does the board feel about accepting a stipulation with respect to certain aspects of the case and or a penalty in exchange for not having to have an evidentiary hearing? And so part of it is what are your thoughts on having to go through the whole process of having specific hearings and have evidence presented versus accepting somebody stipulating that, yeah, I did something wrong and I'm willing to take the penalty?
Oh, well, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that I seek solutions. And I think a lot of times, even in case of a minor infraction or something, I think a lot of times it can be resolved with, let's get together, let's talk about it and come up with the right solution.
Any other questions, council?
Bill, have you ever watched or attended any of the licensing authority meetings?
I have not, no.
It's good
usually-
entertainment, but.
We usually have a ratings contest, so.
Oh, really?
Because they have some interesting cases.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Did we ask number 4?
I did.
Yes.
Okay.
I tied it in number 1.
Okay,
Well, thank you, Bill, very much.
Well, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
thank you.
We'll make our decision.
Appropriate to do right after number 1.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sense to me, so
Yeah.
I changed the order.
Should we ask any of them if they want to be on fine arts?
There you go.
Hello, where do you want me?
Right here?
The brightest light we can find.
The brightest light you can find.
No, what I forgot to ask is keep in there. Thank you, Ann, for coming down and spending the time to apply and interview with us. We appreciate it. We respect your commitment to the community, reflected in your willingness to volunteer for this.
Volunteer? Oh, wait, oh.
Yeah, I guess nobody explained the salary structure to you.
Well, I thought I'd ask at the end of the meeting, but no.
And
Thank
so,
you.
Ann, I got cast lots, and I get to be your interrogator for the session, or at least your primary interrogator.
Oh, well,
So-
great. I took a few notes, so go ahead.
Okay, so, good, we're on a time schedule this evening, so if you just want to make copies, first off, could you explain to the council, why are you interested in serving on the licensing authority?
Well, I've lived in the city of Littleton for 20 years, and I have gotten both my kids through the Littleton Public Schools. Now that my kids are out of the house, more or less, I have more time to get involved, and I would really like to get involved with the city of Littleton. As many of you probably know, I am a real estate agent. Used to have my business in the Denver Tech Center, and a few years ago, I relocated to here. So between, being a resident and being in business here, I'd very much like to get involved with more of the community.
Thank you. What particular skills or experience do you believe you would be bringing to the licensing authority?
Well, in my current position as Realtor, I work with policies and procedures all the time. And what I did was I printed out, so I could see exactly what this board is comprised of. And you have a lot of policies and procedures set forth for people to follow. In my business, as a real estate agent, we have the Real Estate Commission that we, have to, acknowledge and adhere to their rules. We have the Ethics Committee. So I am used to following and enforcing rules and regulations, which you have here. And I'll go in a little bit. There's another question down here that kind of goes on some of my past experience, where I feel like that experience will come into this also.
We may not get to that, so you'll have to
Oh.
figure out how to slyly get it into.
I can,
Okay.
don't worry.
The council does have an attendance criterion for the boards and commissions. The licensing authority tends to have their meetings on the second Wednesday of the month. Do you anticipate having any difficulty in attending their meetings?
I don't see any difficulty. This would be my priority.
Now, some of the council and some of the boards and commissions do have their meetings telecast. Do you have any reservations or concerns over that?
I feel like I'm fairly good at public speaking. I don't have a problem with that. although I am concerned if the camera will add 10 pounds.
Well, you can examine, you can.
As all we are,
Yeah, that's,
as are we all.
Yeah. Well, you can go back and in a few days, this will be posted on the website, so you can go back and you can view it, because right now it's streaming worldwide on the internet, so
hi, Mom.
there you go.
No, I have no concerns about that.
Do you have any conscientious objections to alcohol consumption or the use of medical marijuana?
No, I do not.
Now, could you comment on your ability to be fair and impartial, and in this context, recognize that the authority is a quasi-judicial, and being in a position where you would limit your decisions to the evidence that is presented in chambers and the requirements stated in the city code?
Well, like I said, I've read through the code. It seems to me like the policies are, pretty set forth of what is expected for licensees and conduct of establishments. As I was saying, right now as a real estate agent, I do a lot of mediation and arbitration on a daily basis. I gather information, I gather data, and that helps me make my decisions, and it also helps me give information to my clients so they can make decisions. I have to be fair and impartial. Like I said, there's an ethics committee. I can't steer people. And I don't want them to have my ideas. I want them to have enough information that they can make their own educated decisions. Before I came to Littleton, I worked with Coldwell Banker in Southern California, and I was their human resource representative for their corporate office. One of the things I did was I helped them write their policy and procedure manual for their corporation. And as a personnel representative, I was responsible for overseeing the policies and procedure manual and enforcing it. So I think that ties in with, I have to be impartial, and I have to take, if we had disputes, I'd take in the consideration the information was brought to me, to help, come up with actions for the disputes.
There's, in the courts and also with the authority, there's been some discussion with regard to the process called stipulation, where possibly someone that is being brought before the authority for violations can agree to the facts and possibly also agree to a punishment as part of that. When that happens, it kind of takes the authority, the board itself, out of the process, because it's usually something that's decided in part with the prosecutor before it might be brought, and then the board has a chance to, in effect, kind of rubber stamp that. What are some of your thoughts on stipulation as being used as part of procedures before the authority?
So the stipulations, they bring to us what the action is going to be?
And
Okay.
an agreement to the facts.
Okay, and then we look at it and we agree with it, we don't agree with it, we make sure it's enforced?
The hook is that if the stipulation has a penalty associated with it, how do you feel about that penalty being negotiated by the prosecutor or the attorney rather than assigned?
Well, I would hope that they would have taken in all the information and looked at it impartially and come to their decision. And it seems like we would then, need to uphold their decision. So, if there's someone else, that's saying, here's what we're going to do, I can live with that.
And it's, helps to reduce, on the other side, the pro to it is that it helps to reduce the cost. Witnesses don't
okay.
necessarily need to be brought, particularly if there are either police officers or witnesses that might be used from out of town, regathering them as opposed to folks saying, I agree to the facts.
Well, and if there are people that have more information and more knowledge about the action or the incident than I do, then perhaps they could make a better determination than the board.
Thank you on that. You've mentioned you're a realtor.
Yep.
But, you could be undercover, so are you part of law enforcement?
No,
Okay. Do you have any interest in bar, restaurant, or liquor outlet?
no. I
Or-
occasionally go to one,
Okay.
but no, I have no vested interest.
As far as I know, that doesn't count against you.
Okay.
Maybe it counts for you on this. Any interest in a medical marijuana center?
No.
And in Littleton, the council has established a limit on the number of medical marijuana centers that there are. Not yet setting any particular limit with regard the liquor outlets or liquor licenses at this stage. What are your feelings about limiting the number of liquor licenses?
I think as long as the licensees are responsible and adhere to your policies and procedures and provide a safe environment for both their patrons and for the city of Littleton, I don't see any need to limit the license for liquor. But that's the thing. They need to be responsible. I believe, that especially like with the new tavern in town, that's brought a lot of new people into the area. So these establishments that are, restaurants, we're getting a lot of exposure from people outside of the immediate Littleton area that might not have been here before. And they're coming into downtown, they're seeing what we have to offer, we have great restaurants. They can have a drink, they can do some shopping, they see our town hall center, we're on the light rail. I think it's great exposure to have this, but, they have to be responsible and they will have to be monitored.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And title is real estate broker in your current responsibilities. Have you represented, or would you anticipate as part of your practice representing either a licensee or a potential licensee or a holder of a medical marijuana center license?
No, I'm residential real estate only, not commercial.
Thank you. Have you ever watched or attended any of the licensing authority meetings?
No, I have not.
Do you have any conscientious objection to the use of medical marijuana?
No, I do not. Once again, it has to be responsible, monitored. People need to be, cognizant of what they're doing. Whether they're the person that's using the medical marijuana or selling. And that's part of why this board is here, to make sure that, those things aren't abused.
Any other questions, council? Thank you very much, Ann.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have 10 applications for 2 spots. If we were to accept you, could we keep your application on in case of another opening?
I would love it. You'll see me again.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, the process happens, January each year?
February.
February.
February each year, but I think they start doing applications, so.
Applications are
We
taken.
generally do the boards at the first of the year, but we've had some openings come up.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate seeing all of you again.
Okay, we hope to make a decision in the next week or two, and let you know. Thank you again for
Thank you.
coming down here.
Oh, I didn't know there were snacks.
Grab one, please.
Oh, I gotta watch that, Tim.
It's in lieu of salary.
Well, I learned something interesting today.
Watson.
Watson.
No Watson.
I went to the
You're
bank
up
to open my
After you.
campaign account,
Yeah.
and I had to sign a document. And on
take
that
it.
document, I had to initial that this account had nothing to do with buying,
I do. How are you,
selling,
John?
Good, we'll say yourself.
anything
I'm
with
doing all
medical
right.
marijuana.
Good.
I'll
Counsel?
be asking you some questions
I
tonight.
said,
Very good, sir.
Counsel. Starting off, we would ask you, why are you interested in serving on the license authority?
My wife and I are presently unemployed, but not entirely by choice, so we have lots of time. We're used to working 12-hour days and 6 and 7 days a week, and we're not now. So I've joined the Board of Building Appeals, and that doesn't occupy enough time and space. So I'm here hoping to do the same kind of work for the Liquor Licensing Authority.
What skills or experience would you bring to this board?
Well, I've got too much education that I won't go into, but I've had 30 years of real estate development experience. My father was Elmer Watson of Watson's Pharmacy at 9th and Lincoln. I'm familiar with pharmacy requirements for all of my life. I've never participated in illegal drugs, but I'm familiar with the marijuana process and how it operates in Denver, and I'm pleased with the city and the way they've handled their 4 marijuana dispensaries, if that's the way it's going to continue. And I have an experience with liquor licenses, never as a licensee, but they were in my family, and I'm familiar with the process for licenses, application, violation processing, and what should happen regularly in Denver and Lakewood and other cities around the state. I don't know that I've ever participated in Littleton, but I'm familiar generally with how the process operates.
The council has an attendance criterion, and would you be available to meet on the night of your board or commission, which is on the second Tuesday or Wednesday of the month? Yeah, second Wednesday of the month.
Absolutely. I've got a 100% attendance requirement for the Board of Building Appeals, and I don't tend to miss meetings or parties for that matter. So I'll be able to attend all of those at a complete 100%.
I don't know how many parties they have, unfortunately.
Well, the annual party anyway. I'll have double invites if that were the case.
Would you be uneasy, worried, or intimidated by the telecasting of your board meeting on Littleton's Channel 8?
Doesn't bother me one way or other. I'm not looking for fame as a Littleton licensee authority, but I'm not concerned about it. I presume it's being broadcast tonight, but it's of virtually no importance to me.
Okay, thank you.
Means my wife will know what I'm doing. She'll be happy about it.
Do you have any conscientious objections to drinking or using medical marijuana?
I have no objections to alcohol whatsoever, and I'm familiar with alcohol and licensing authorities. In terms of marijuana, I don't know that, I've never participated, never taken marijuana in any fashion. I understand the rules and will apply them fairly. If there's a medical necessity, I can understand it. If someone's a qualified licensee and one of our city spots was available, I think that should be considered fairly, and that's what I would agree to do. I have my concerns about what happens with, like, for example, in the city of Denver, how the multiple licenses have caused problems, but I think Littleton has it under control and it should be considered fairly, and there are some people that have a medical necessity for it. I don't know that I understand it, but I would certainly look at it and give them every opportunity to hear what the evidence was.
This next question, you've pretty much answered it with the other one, but would you comment on your ability to be fair and impartial and limit your decisions to the evidence presented in chambers and the requirements stated in the city code?
I'm familiar with the requirements for licensing and reasonableness and necessity, and I don't have a lot of biases for people or projects, so I'd be happy to listen to what their requirements are. I've certainly not had any problem with the Board of Building Appeals in making that decision, and just share my opinions on what the relevant facts and law are.
Are you in law enforcement?
No, sir.
Or do you have any interest in a bar, restaurant, liquor store, or medical marijuana center?
No, sir, I saw the question. The closest thing I could find is my wife made a small loan to a restaurant that I'm not involved in, and it's not something that would affect my judgment. It's not in Littleton, for example, so it doesn't affect me in terms of how I feel about the businesses.
At the present time, Littleton has 4 medical marijuana establishments, and what are your feeling about limiting the number of these licenses?
Well, it depends on medical necessity, I'm certain, and I would not willingly expand them just for the sake of expanding them, because the city has 4 that are available for people. Denver certainly has a proliferation if they're interested. I'd look at it honestly and fairly in terms of the evidence that was presented if the council chose to expand the number. But I'd need to know what the evidence is. Even the persons who said they rely on medical marijuana and it's necessary have not indicated that we need more licenses. That's my experience with them. But I'd look at the evidence and the law before I'd make a decision.
How do you feel about stipulation? This would be in liquor license violations or when the evidence is presented and a plea bargain is reached and you don't have anything to say with it, about it.
That doesn't bother me. I think virtually all liquor license violations are resolved that way. Businesses, in my experience, once again, tend to be people that want to stay in business. I've had to deal with it with my mother when she was 69 years old and had to deal with a police cadet who had a driver. She couldn't read the driver's license, let alone tell if the cadet was 20 or 80. So these are, generally speaking, honest people, don't know the process. They need to be stipulated out so they can try to preserve their business. And I presume that's how most of them will continue to be handled, and that doesn't bother me one whit. So I think that's an appropriate way to resolve them for people that are uneducated in the experience, don't want to experience a large degree of expense, and don't want to face the loss of their business because of a mistake they made, because we can all make mistakes.
My question. Any other questions here?
Have you watched or attended any of the licensing authority meetings?
I have in other jurisdictions, not in the city of Littleton. We've lived here 10 years, but I've never had anybody involved in either a license violation or application in the city of Littleton. But I've been to many in the last several years because of friends that were facing a violation. For example, my family had liquor licenses in Denver for the Watson's Pharmacy and the pharmacy license there as well, but never in Littleton. And I haven't watched the TV channel, quite frankly, so.
John, I think you answered the question about limiting the number of licenses for medical marijuana, but what about limiting the number of liquor licenses in the city?
Reasonableness and necessity. I lived in downtown Denver as well, where there is a liquor license on all four sides of my loft project, and that was reasonable and necessary because it's LODO. But I sure wouldn't want to see them on all four sides of me in my neighborhood, or next to schools, or in inappropriate jurisdictions. So it's reasonableness and necessity, and you know, Littleton has that area on Littleton Boulevard where it's probably reasonable to have one on every business for half a dozen businesses in a row, and that doesn't bother me. But there's certainly no necessity to do that same thing in neighborhoods that don't have strip mall and other bars, nightclubs, and restaurants adjacent to them. It depends on the facts and the law.
Okay.
Any other questions, council? Thank you very much, John, for
Certainly.
coming
Thank you,
down.
Mayor.
We appreciate your service on the
Have a good evening, folks.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
We'll make a decision in the next week or two.
Very good. And the application on file is not a problem.
They can't serve on two boards though, right?
Yeah, they can.
They can?
We've had
Those
them
two?
before. We've had
Have
them
we?
before.
Who?
Here's our
Because we
hot
got
seat.
Gallagher too.
I don't think so. I don't think we can.
I don't think they
I thought it was
can.
a single board.
I thought we had one that we had to have resign the board because they wanted it. They
Yeah,
said they would. Can they
Kinda thought
We'll talk about it later, but I think we have.
Well, I don't know. It's up to us.
Really?
You've told people.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
That they can?
Happy to be here.
We're going to go through, I think, some of the questions that I'm assuming and hoping were provided to you ahead of time.
They were,
So,
yeah.
We have a quick chat about those and maybe ask a few other questions, if that's all right.
Perfect.
Okay. The first question is, why are you interested in serving on the licensing authority?
Well, first of all, the quality of life that Littleton affords is very important to me. Second, my wife has served on one of the Littleton boards for a number of years and has found it to be very fulfilling. And it is, would be a good way for me to make some contribution to that quality of life.
Can you talk a bit about the skills or experience you'd bring to this particular board?
Sure. I am a small business owner, member of our board, and so I think the experience I've had over the last 20 years involved in that business gives me an ability to make critical decisions and deal with things in a fair and even-handed way.
Council has an attendance criteria for all boards and commissions. Would your availability be not an issue as far as meeting on the second Wednesday of the month for the licensing authority?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Would you have any concerns, worries, uneasiness, or intimidation with respect to being telecast on Channel 8, the government access?
No, none.
Okay. Let's see here. Do you have any conscientious objections to drinking or the use of medical marijuana?
No, I don't.
Would you be able to comment on your ability to be fair and impartial and limit your decisions to evidence presented in chambers and the requirements as stated in the city code?
Sure, yeah, I don't think that would be a problem at all. I had a situation a few years ago where I was on a jury in a rape case, actually, and the individual who was being accused was definitely not a good person. He had a very troubled background, and there was a feeling amongst all the jurors that probably something happened, but in this particular case, given the facts that were presented and the jury instructions and so forth, it was very clear that the burden of proof had not been met, and we acquitted him. And so it's, we were able to follow those instructions carefully and I think came to the correct conclusion in that case.
Have you any involvement in law enforcement or any financial interest in a bar, restaurant, liquor store, or medical marijuana center?
No.
The city council has limited the number of licenses for medical marijuana centers to a total of 4. However, there's no such prohibition on the absolute number of liquor licenses that can be granted. So what are your feelings about limiting the number of potential liquor licenses?
Well, I think so long as the group or individual applying for the license has gone through the proper process and there's nothing in their background that would indicate that they were going to run the business in any way other than, a very neighborhood-friendly and legal fashion, I don't know that a quota or something would necessarily be appropriate. I mean, there is no quota now, and I feel like the balance of liquor establishments in Littleton is good. I mean, it's not like South Broadway or something like that. I wouldn't want to see that, obviously, but.
The licensing authority has, on occasion, I mean, a lot of times what will happen with the licensing authority is that someone who holds, for example, a liquor license bar, for the sake of an argument, will be cited for serving a patron that's inebriated or a minor. And there's the potential opportunity for the licensee to essentially stipulate to the facts of the case, the situation that led to the citation, and then agree to pay the fine, which is worked out between the respective attorneys and presented to the board. Alternately, the board can actually ask for an evidentiary hearing where both sides, the defendant and the plaintiff, which would be the city, would have to present evidence as to what happened in the situation. Talk about your thoughts upon concerning maybe the pro and con of one side of that versus the other.
Well, I think if the facts of the case are agreed upon by all parties, then I think stipulating to those facts is perfectly appropriate. If there's some significant dispute as to the facts, then, an evidentiary hearing, I think, would be perfectly appropriate. I guess that's kind of my thought.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I've got, but.
Phil has one.
Well, John, congratulations on your CFA designation.
Oh, thanks.
So, those aren't easy to come by. Part of that puts you in a position of being able to determine from businesses their creditworthiness or their business valuation for either tax or transfer purposes. With that, do you have any clients that are licensees, or do you anticipate being in any position, given your business that you have, of having a client that might be a licensee or a licensee applicant?
Sure. Yeah, the business that I have is a bank. We do interest rate risk management work for banks. And so, and they're all over the country, so I don't think there's any type of conflicts there. On the other hand, because banking is such a heavily regulated industry, I've had an opportunity to see how, number one, how important regulation is, but also the importance that the implementation or enforcement of those regulations is done in a fair and even-handed way. I've been kind of on both sides of that particular issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question, although it may be more related to your banking.
Okay.
But, and it's a little bit, it's somewhat off of this beaten path, but I mentioned it to Jim earlier. I opened my campaign account this afternoon, and for the first time ever, I was given a document that I had to sign that said that I was not going to use this account for anything having to do with medical marijuana, that I wasn't buying it, that I wasn't selling it, that I wasn't operating a business, that I wasn't, I mean, it was like,
Wow.
it was like 2 lines of it. And I asked them, I said, is that new? And they said, mm-hmm. And they said it came down from the feds.
Yeah.
So it is, I mean, marijuana is federally, it's still illegal. So do you know
Right.
anything about?
I think what it is I think they're using and that's totally out of the area of banking that we work in, but I think that's probably some anti-money laundering safeguards that they're trying to put in. And because marijuana is still federally illegal. And banks are federally insured and so forth.
Right.
That's, I'm sure, the genesis of that. But
So you have the Justice Department saying they're not going to prosecute them, and then you have whoever regulates the banks.
Well,
saying they're not going to allow them to do banks.
they can't open an account.
Well, and I've heard that actually from several people that these dispensaries are having a really hard time getting funding because none of the banks want to do business with them.
Want to lend them any money. Well,
They're mostly on a cash basis, yeah.
because of the federal law.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that was a little off the beaten path, but a little interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Have you ever watched the the licensing authority on television?
No, I don't think I have. I've watched a few council meetings, but not, I don't think.
Big points.
So we've got
Big star.
better ratings. Better for us.
Any other questions, Council?
Well, maybe we should ask what he thought of them.
No.
Let's stop while we're ahead.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll make our decision next week. And then there's 10 applicants for 2 positions, so if
What are
don't
you
pick
looking
them,
at?
we keep your application until
Oh,
January where we start the new process.
they rewrote it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for spending time. You bet.
To the back.
Oh, you get relegated to the back row, Debbie, how about?
right, the games are resuming.
That we have to quit with, because when we've interviewed for planning liaison.
We are on page 313. Charlie?
Sewers.
Sewers.
Charlie? Thank you, Charlie.
Any questions?
Council, let me just, Charlie introduces this. Council, we do have some plant staff here tonight, I think for people on TV and people who are watching. City of Littleton co-owns wastewater treatment plant with the city of Inglewood. It's a $50 million a day facility. It's, I think, maybe the third largest wastewater treatment plant in the state of Colorado. Many people may not realize, in 1979, the two cities went together, received a major EPA grant and consolidated sanitary sewer delivery for a huge portion of the South Denver metro area. The plant probably serves somewhere in the vicinity of 250,000 people, significantly larger than the two cities, but the two cities were the two legal entities that were able to come together and form the partnership. But this plant, as a regional plant, has significantly improved the environment and significantly benefited 250,000 citizens in the South Metro area. So tonight, we co-own it. The city of Inglewood runs the plant, and with us tonight, Dennis Stowe is the plant manager. Chong Wu is our facilities engineer, and Jim Talent is the treatment manager. So three very knowledgeable people who are involved in running the day-to-day operations of the plant. Just wanted council to know that they'd be here tonight to provide any technical assistance that council might have. I'll turn it over to Charlie Blosson, our Public Services Director, and who can introduce this, and then obviously Doug Farman and the finance team that works more on the rate setting and financial end of running the plant. So, Charlie?
Thank you, Jim. We're on page 314 of the budget book, and 315 are the detailed line expenditures. I'll hit a couple of items and then just respond to questions. First of all, we show that we are not selling very many sewer taps next year unless a development occurs that is totally unexpected at this time. We're not showing any revenue for sewer taps inside the city. There is some revenue from sewer taps outside, but I can assure you, in meeting with the districts, we do not expect to make a lot of sales issuing sewer taps. That could change depending on some development activity. Obviously, if Marathon, Ensur, or if we annex into the sewer district area, something, we would be able to issue some taps. But at this point, Jim and myself and other staff do not expect to see an increase in sewer tap fees. Nothing else in the budget has changed from 2011 to 2012. We're running a lean machine. And so we have cut areas where, we say we aren't going to do that. A couple of years ago, I did reduce the contingency in this budget from 250,000 to 50, because in all the years of managing it, we have never spent more than 50. Of course, the first year I did that, we had to tap the contingency fund for more than $50,000. However, that was an anomaly, and I will tell you we have gone back to the 50,000. Other than that, there really isn't anything changing in the budget. I will tell you that the UV treatment process.
Tell people what UV is, Charlie.
UV is the ultraviolet treatment process as recommended by the engineer for the plant and the plant staff. Council has been involved in discussions about this in the past. We hired a consultant to look into it to see if it was absolutely necessary for us to do it this year. The report came back and said you do not have to do it right now. So we have taken that cost out of the budget. Furthermore, the consultant will be meeting with the city of Inglewood on October 10th I believe Mayor Clark and Councilman Stallman and I will be attending that meeting representing Littleton and hearing how the Englewood Council reacts to the consultant report. Obviously, a decision on ultraviolet is not made now and may not be for several months, if at all. The other project that was recommended by plant staff that we have not included is an expansion of the services and support building, or the administration building known to most people, where we've had our meetings. They're recommending a $3.5 million expansion of that building. We have not included that in the budget either. If it is decided by council later to continue to pursue that project, we have the ability to amend the budget and include our share of that project. But we are not putting it in the budget at this time.
Council, let me just make a comment on that too for the record, that these are items, and because we were working under a very constrained budget and then keep being compatible with our side, what we're asking our own employees to do, but the ultraviolet, council did a lot of study on this. I think technically, there's not much question that it is a superior technology. There will probably be a point in time, maybe the next 3 to 5 years, when some council sitting in this room will see that that's a favorable thing to do, but that's not the question that was asked this year. This council said, is it mandated, or are we required to do it? The answer was no, but just for future reference, that's probably not an issue that's going to go away. I think some council in the future will be sitting here discussing that. And on the same thing on the administrative building, the plant, we have some people sitting in mobile homes or trailers out there. It's not an optimal situation, and so again, because we're working on our side in Littleton of strict cost containment, but it's not that these projects don't have some merit. We're deferring them. We didn't recommend them to you this year. Just for people who may be coming on the council, are going to be here a while. This is something you'll probably hear about at some time in the future. Yes, Dr. Cole?
Yeah, if I can get my voice to work.
Sure.
I think this council also knows that somewhere ahead of us is going to be the ultraviolet issue.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think we share your foresight.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, because just the fact that we didn't recommend it doesn't mean that it's not going to come back at some point in the future. And Charlie, could you also, the fact that we serve 8 special sewer districts, in fact, for people who may be watching, actually 2/3 of the customers of the plant actually do not live in the city of Littleton through contracts. We serve a large, probably I think 8 special districts, ranging all the way into southern Jefferson County, Ken Carroll Ranch, up in what's called North Ranch, which is behind the hogback. Mr. Bloston met with them to discuss the finances. Charlie, you want to report to the council any feedback that you got from those districts?
Yeah, Doug Farman and I and others met with all of the representatives from the districts. I believe there was only one district not there, and they went through the budget book as well as the rate study that was prepared by staff, and they do support this budget and the proposed 2% rate increase for sewer service charges.
And Charlie, I believe they were advised that this item would be discussed tonight?
Yes. And I told them that they could come and listen in on the meeting or watch it on television or on computer.
And we also keep them completely advised as to when the public hearing process will be, so we've kept them completely informed
Right.
as to the status of our process.
They did call me today and indicated that they support the staff presentation as shown tonight.
Thank you, Charlie.
If there are any questions regarding the detailed expenditure, and then Finance Director Doug Farman has passed out a latest rate study, we'll be glad to answer.
Charlie? Would you talk about 75, 85, 01, 03, and even go ahead and talk about 04? It's the sanitary sewer maintenance and repair and maintenance projects.
That's $300,000?
Yeah.
Okay, that is money we spend annually to repair and fix sewer lines and manholes in trouble locations. Council, we operate a 3-person maintenance crew, and we've been doing that for more than 30 years. And they identify locations in Littleton city limits where sewer lines are in need of adjustment. I'll give you some information. We have a sewer in Littleton that is still active that was built before 1919. And the reason we know it was built before 1919, because that's what the map shows, and the sewer is on the map. We don't know when it was built. But it is still active and working underground for almost 100 years. So I will prove the point that just because something is old doesn't mean it has to be replaced.
Jim?
Charlie, on that same item, does that maintenance also occur to those residences that are served by a sewer district instead of by the city of Littleton sewer?
Yeah, there are City of Littleton residents, Councilmember Brinkman, Jim Taylor. I believe are the only 2 that are on council that have sewers that are provided, serviced by the district that overlaps into the city limits. The best example I can give you is the Answer property is in the Southwest Metro Water and Sanitation District. Beaumar South is in the Platte Canyon Water and Sanitation District. Hamlet and Coventry are in the Columbine Water and Sanitation District. So even though they're in the city limits, their collection system is managed by an outside district, one of the 8 that Jim identified earlier. Trailmark is all served by the Ken Carroll Ranch Water and Sanitation District. We have nothing to do with those sewer lines. So the projects I mentioned on this budget are for ones in the city limits that we own and maintain. So when we have to replace a manhole, we have some sewers where there are problems that the crew has to go in sometimes once a week, sometimes twice a week, and check to make sure they're okay, that we don't have a blockage. This money goes to fixing those and reducing the number of those problem locations. We call them trouble spots. And if we have a trouble spot on a sewer line that we have to go check once a week, it gets high on the list for replacement. The $300,000 will take care of that. Over a period of time, we hope to reduce the number of trouble spot locations so that we don't have to go in there on a regular basis and do that. Will we ever eliminate all of them? Not for a while.
Does that money include the in-place lining that you're doing?
No, that's actually a different account. If you look under there, $200,000 under 789002, yeah, that's what we call slip lining, or fixing a line without digging it up. And you actually line it with a fabric, and it's technology that is state-of-the-art. Everybody likes to use it because you don't have to dig up a street, and you can even do it in the middle of the winter.
It's the human body equivalent of inserting a stent.
Yes.
Thank you for the metaphor, Councilman.
If you look under the budget too on, we have $500,000 that we use for doing that on the Interceptor. It's 758504 called Interceptor Sewer Repair Project. For the last several years and continuing for a while, we do $500,000 of that same process, slip lining, in this interceptor that runs between Bellevue and the sewer plant. That project is apportioned to all users of the sewer, not just Littleton residents. So all accounts, almost 50,000, are charged a part of that cost. And it costs us $500,000 a year to slip line that line. That sewer was installed prior to 1977 when the sewer plant opened, and it's been operational ever since. We've run into some problems, nothing real serious, but if we do this slip lining of that sewer, it'll literally last forever. Or at
That's a
least as
long
long as
time.
I can say forever.
Right.
And
Other
so,
questions for
we're gonna
Charlie?
do that project again in 2012.
Mr. Stallman?
On the joint plan operations line, 741304, the actuals look like they're coming down pretty consistently from 08, 09, 10. The year-end estimate for 11 is a little over 6.5 million. The budget, however, is a little under 7.3 million, which is an 11.6% increase.
Explain it.
Yeah, help me understand why we need to bump ops 11%
Sure.
when it's been declining over time.
Well, actually, I'd like to have Dennis Stowe, the manager of the Littleton Inglewood wastewater treatment plant, address some of that, because he prepared the plant budget. You want to do some of that?
Yep, part of that being under budget that far is we've had a significant amount of plant turnover, staff turnover, and we've actually been promoting from within. So we've had vacancies filled by existing staff, which maintains the vacancy. And I don't have a good number for you on how much that is, but that's been one of the issues that we've been dealing with. So that's one reason why it's under budget. We've been implementing some energy conservation projects to try and get our energy use down. We don't typically plan for credit on the energy savings until they actually occur. So there's generally a year difference between when we put a project in and then we budget for the reduced energy use. And then there are some projects that we plan to do and we simply can't get to. So that's why that difference exists.
Dennis, I guess, is there any sort of a schedule I mean, that's by far it's over half of the total expenditures of the plant in a single line item. Is there any sort of detail that we've got that we could have a peek at so we understand sort of what you guys are looking at?
Yeah, I get a report every month from the plant that has an expenditure amount, and I can provide that to council if you wish.
Well, I mean, I guess this budget amount is what I'm thinking.
Okay, if you look back follow the line to the left under 2008, you'll notice it was 7,283 as an actual.
Right.
In 2010, the actual was 6.67 million. The budget for this year is 7.23 adjusted, as you can see across there.
But Charlie, what he's asking for is a line item breakdown of the operations
For
budget.
2012, for the 2012.
Yes,
budget.
I have that.
So,
Well,
Yes.
in the
who would
item,
like to have it other than Mr. Stallman?
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, take it a little bit further, because you've got your 2011 annualized estimate, and, I think the reconciliation would be, okay, here's what it looks like in 2011. We've had the plant operating, and take it to the 2012 budget column.
I do have that, and I can provide it to council in a later packet if you need it.
I think the general explanation, we can get you line item information,
Yes.
yes, sir.
I'd be more comfortable, doing one of these as long as if there's some, you understand. I mean, I'd just like to see some of the details so we understand exactly
We
what's going on.
understand completely. We'll get it to you before you have to adopt anything.
Deal.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I mean, if you take it down to the bottom, you're looking at nearly a $3.5 million difference between the 2011 annualized estimate and the 2012 budget. And I understand, as you go through some of the projects and possibly, from Dennis's perspective, there were projects that were deferred from 2011 to look in 2012. But as we, take a look at 2012, just lumping them, just moving them without having a good
We will
understanding.
provide you with the detail, and Dennis and his team are very responsive when we make those requests.
Thank you, Dennis. The next part is the rate increase. We're projecting or suggesting a 2% rate increase for 2012. That's on the supplemental information.
It's in the handout, it's right after page 321 in the handout that everybody should have. Let me know if you don't have a copy. I sent it to council last week in council mail.
Got it.
I think Charlie hit on a lot of the highlights. We perform this 5-year projection, financial projection study every year, and we've updated it for 2012. He has referred to some of the major assumptions. The ultraviolet project has been omitted. There's very little tap growth that we're estimating over the next 5 years. We do have to keep some bond requirements as far as ending cash balance of at least $5 million. We also have added an extra $2 million based on previous council direction for future capital needs. So we try to maintain $7 million now in the sewer fund. So that's another assumption for minimum ending cash balance. And we also have to maintain a debt coverage of 1.10, and you can see that on the first page. The second page is some of the assumptions I referred to, and you can see there's minimal growth that we're projecting over the next 5 years. And in order to maintain those assumptions, we're recommending a 2% increase for all the customers next year. And you can see over the years, it would be a 3% projection for the next year, next few years, and then 3.5%. So that's going to be a moving target. We'll be updating this 5-year study every year. So the rates would only be approved for 1 year, but we are recommending 2% for 2012, and would like to get some council direction on that.
Well, and I think what we need to say in addition to this is, we're projecting to spend down our reserve amount. We're currently at, what, 11 million bucks? We are bringing in less revenue that we spend, about $1.2 million difference. We're doing small increments over the next few years to try and get the revenue up to where it's going to match the expenses while we're spending down our reserve to get to, pardon me, our $7 million target limit for the reserve amount.
Yeah, there is an operating line there that we added this year, Mayor, and that's the operating surplus. You can see we're actually generating an operating surplus over the next 5 years. But if you look at the capital items the city would be projecting to spend, then that would be bringing down the reserve. That is correct.
Yeah.
For the capital.
And I've gotten a couple emails about people's sewers bill and what it goes for. And roughly speaking, we spend about $7.2 million that we give to Inglewood for the operation of the plant. We do between $4 to $4.5 million in debt service for bonds that we have outstanding, and that leaves about $2.1 million for the interceptor maintenance and the maintenance that we provide and the salaries for the Littleton folks that work on the Littleton sewer lines underneath the streets. And that pretty much makes up the $14 million sewer budget. Bruce?
It is, all right, so you guys don't have depreciation in here as part of that $7 million, right? Do we?
No, that
Does
is,
plan ops include depreciation?
that does not include depreciation.
Is depreciation anywhere in the rates here as far as any sort of capital reserve?
No, depreciation would be, we do show it in the financial statements, but that would be some of the capital items that are purchased throughout the year. But no, we don't include depreciation.
I mean, essentially, we're not really couping that cost per se. We're just, it's ops, and I guess CapEx at some point.
Right, that depreciation would lower the ending fund balance, that's true.
Okay. And it's obviously non-cash. The other question is, the Denver water contract had that water bank element in it, which was intended to be of use in terms of potential future developments, like possibly a Sterling Ranch. Has there been any visibility to what's going on with Sterling Ranch and how that might impact this particular fund?
We did not include anything from
No, I know.
Sterling in here, and
But is there any market intelligence at this point?
No.
no.
All right, is there any indication, public, that we've got in terms of what their timing looks like at this point?
We have not seen any public announcement. As you know, they had a pretty vigorous PR campaign when they were trying to get their zoning through Douglas County. Now that their zoning's been approved, if somebody in the room has seen any public announcement or any PR from them. I have not seen it at all, and we've not heard of any at all since the zoning hearings. So we've received absolutely no information about any potential movement on that project.
Okay.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, Doug, taking a look at the page immediately following 321, which is taking a look at revenues and expenditures, understanding what is going on. My question is kind of, the assumptions on the projected levels, which take us out to 2016, you've got some of the rate increase impacting the revenue line, I'm assuming, right?
Right.
Okay. What commitment is there on the operating costs, or is there an assumption of inflation, efficiency that is built into those lines, or is it operating as normal with a few little blips here or there?
On the second page, right after that front page of the sewer analysis, we do have some assumptions. At the bottom of the page, there's expenditure assumptions. So we do include some personnel line item increases over the next 5 years. And the bottom of that expenditure assumption list, there's by city operating. Can everybody find that line?
Okay.
And so we do have just a basic 3% inflationary increase from 2012 to 2016. So we do have some of those built in. You can see some other categories there with 3% and 0% for general fund transfer, because we don't anticipate that going up.
Recognizing that some of what happens in the plant operations is fuel utilization in transporting post-processed waste. And recognizing what we did for other city budget line items, which is put in a significant amount to cover some fuel costs, and recognizing there's also other chemical use that's there. So in addition to the personnel, I might ask the plant folks to comment on 3% as an inflation assumption over those outlying years.
Dennis, you or Jim or anybody want to make a comment on that? And Dennis, one of the best answers is it depends.
I was going to say,
No coaching allowed.
if I can answer that question, I'll find another job and
You could be a good hedge fund manager.
It's, as far as costs across the board are concerned, we've experienced anywhere from 0 to, I'm going to say, up to 8 to 10% increases. So the 3% with what's going on now would seem to be appropriate. Electricity has been going up significantly, probably, I think, 5 to 6% a year. We're planning on actually 3 to 4 next year. Chemicals have been going up because they're energy intensive. They take a lot of energy to produce. So those are on the higher end. Englewood has had a salary freeze for the past couple of years, so that's been 0 for a while. Next year, Englewood is looking at approving a 2% increase in salary. So I think the 3% is probably good for going forward.
And like I said, that's a moving target. We can adjust that every year. But we also have Charlie look at that every year to make sure it's in line with the plan estimates.
It's just a concern, and we'll get to it certainly when we get to our sewer fund study session item relative to the rates in the outlying years. I wouldn't necessarily argue against the modest increase we have at this point in time, but at some point in time, inflation may raise up and bite us a little bit, and we're kind of precariously balanced on that spend down that the mayor had mentioned, and so there's, I think, little room in here. It's not a heavy-handed projection as conservatively as we might estimate some of our other outlying costs in the city. This doesn't appear to be as conservative in that. So trying to say, hey, we're going to be able to hold rate levels going forward, I'd put in question.
Bruce and then Peggy?
The assumption on the rate percentage increase is equivalency between inside and outside the city at 2%, which certainly is carried forward, and for the most part is carried back, although in '08, there was a jump up, I guess, in the outside percent, while not on the inside. What's the logic between looking for flat, or equivalency between the percentage increase versus the dollar increase? In other words, since the city rates are higher in general, does it make, what's your guys' logic for, you know, wanting the percentages to be the same, which basically means the city rates end up continuing to be higher because they start from a higher base?
I gotta think about this answer a second. In the words of a wise old retiring city manager, it all depends, huh?
Well, why don't we clarify the question, because the base that you're talking about is because we're also carrying those collection system costs in there, and the adjustment that was made in '08 was to reflect a model that Mayor Clark had developed, which was that the consumption was higher in the outlying areas due to their census density numbers, and so therefore they were incurring a larger percentage of the treatment cost. So the rates are actually, for the most part, aimed at the equalization of those treatment costs.
And you're basically saying at this juncture, you think the treatment costs are equivalent, more or less, in terms of what's being covered by the rates, and that the city rates, taking into account the collection system.
They're equitable, yes.
Yeah, so then the percentage, but you're still seeing, because you've got the 11 rates are 228 in the city and 173 outside, and if they both go up 2%, they're gonna continue to do this. They're gonna, I mean, they'll continue to diverge. The city rates are gonna, you know, increase.
Well, I don't know if that's, I'll turn that over back to Mr. Farman. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, they have to be. I mean, the 2% off a higher number has gotta be.
You're right, and I would say that the reason why they've been kept at the same percentage is to prevent another fight with the connector districts, because their mindset has been if the percentage isn't exactly the same, then they're getting screwed. But as you point out, it can't be the same, and yet still the treatment costs go up the same for both. But if the future council is going to look at sewer rates, looking at whether to charge by consumption versus a flat fee, then I think that would probably be the appropriate time to look at all of that. I mean, that would be my recommendation. And the data for the 2010 census ought to be out. So if you wanted to still charge at a flat rate, you could go and confirm whether the population density per dwelling unit is still higher outside the city than it is inside the city, which if we're going to charge a flat rate, we ought to do every time the census comes out. So depending on which direction that council wants to go, if you want to charge on consumption, then that kind of gets away from that. If you want to continue to charge on a flat rate per dwelling unit, then you probably need to make sure that their density per dwelling unit is still higher than it is here and what that percentage difference is, and then adjust the treatment fees to reflect that. But that was part of the question related to Charlie, because some of these budget line items reflect costs that are specific to Littleton and should not be allocated to the connector districts. Some of these costs reflect costs that should be allocated to the connector districts. One of the examples is the interceptor. Obviously, the joint operations of the Bi-City should be paid for by everybody. The lining of the sewer plant, or the sewer lines within the city of Littleton is something we should bear totally. And then the personnel costs, and that allocation of those line items was done by Red Oak, what, 3 or 4 years ago?
2006.
Oh, it's been a long time, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And those percentages probably haven't changed, but my guess is the new council would want to go off and look at that also. But you're right, if you just simply apply the same percentage, to the combined rate for inside the city and outside the city, then there's going to be a disparity, or in other words, the difference that the outside districts is being charged vis-à-vis the inside district is actually going to decline over the years, which is what's happened. Any other questions on the sewer? I'm sorry.
I'll try to ask this, and one of you pick it up. From the audit, the audit of the city budget, when we looked at the reserve as a portion of the total commitment, you remember, and
Yes.
we saw, so if you can pick up on that?
I think what Peggy was referring to is we established some policies about what percentage of the general fund we should have in reserve, and the audit was also looking at, what were they using as standards where they were looking at what the reserve amounts? You remember what that was? The sewer operations are a little different because we have a bond requirement that requires us to have $5 million in reserve, or
Well, my question is, are we indeed comfortably dealing with that requirement?
Well, I think Mr. Farman tried to address that because this is operated as a Tabor enterprise, it does operate under a separate set of policies.
Well, I knew that, but
And
it's still,
so I think he tried to address that in terms of the bond requirements of the 5 million, and then the council added another 2 million, I believe it was 2 million to the top.
Yeah, and that satisfies the reserve policy that council adopted earlier this
Yeah.
year.
So
Are you suggesting that the outside auditor ask a question about it?
no, but
Oh.
the approaches they gave in terms of whether or not we were above any kind of danger level.
I suspect that the criteria they were using to apply to the regular finances of the city wouldn't apply to the sewer fund because of the reserve amount required by the bonding.
Okay,
So,
So you've studied this more than I have.
That would be my guess. You think that? Okay.
I think that's accurate.
Okay, I just want assurance.
Tiffany okays what I say.
Yeah, the follow-on to some of that, Peggy, is what I was mentioning earlier, which is, this in its projection takes us down from about 11+ million, which is projected at the end of 2011, over that period to 2016, down to that, by policy, what we've said is a minimum reserve of 7 million. If that is indeed the case, then any kind of increases at that point in time going further are going to be a little inconsistent with what we're deciding as a 2% increase at this point in time, and because we've spent down reserves. And so some of that being able to take that further means we would be passing more of any increase in costs, because right now what we're doing is we're passing part of that through in the spend down of reserves as opposed to in the rates.
And for all that complexity you just said, that was sort of this big picture I'm trying to get at.
I'm comfortable with the 2%. I think that's a reasonable amount. I think that the rate analysis that the financial department did is a good one. I'm comfortable getting down to 7 million. In fact, that may be a little high, but, oh, Charlie's grimacing.
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Well, certainly that's a council prerogative. You have the option to be more conservative.
Yeah.
We think this is reasonable, and we agree, Mr. Cernanek, that there's uncertainties. I think what Mr. Farman said is that if events change dramatically, we would be talking about higher rates. Right now, it seems to be at least a middle-of-the-road comfort level.
Okay, any other questions on sewer? I hope not. All right, thank you, guys.
Inglewood
Appreciate it.
team, thank you very much for being here.
That brings us back to where we left off yesterday, which is fire.
Fire.
Page 108. So close, and yet now we can back up 200 pages, yes. Doug,
I'm gonna put the question out. It's not specifically with regard, page 108, but yesterday we were talking about the revenue items.
Yes.
And particularly, we had an expected, or at least at this point in time, budgeted decline in a couple of line items in the revenue side, primarily because of decreased costs expected, so that the reimbursements from the partners would indeed be less.
That's right.
Okay. Now, when I start to take a look at the overall fire department in the expenditures, so we go to the expenditure line there, and we see the total fire department actually going up 333 or almost 334,000 on the expenditure side. Page 108 has a decline in expenditures, but I'm just looking for a reconciliation, because you said costs are going down, so reimbursements are going down, but when we look at the overall expenditure line, it's up. Okay, so I'm just a little confused.
I think the major issue with what you're referring to is the Medic 16, where the partners picked up the full share of the cost of that for the 2-year period. Next year would be the first contract year when the 3 partners would pick up the cost of that over time. So instead
Which is a $100,000 shift.
Okay.
And so that was actually part of the revenues and part of the expenditures in 2011, but
Okay, so
now
that
we're not
take-
going to
that-
get quite as much reimbursement in 2012 because we're going to be picking up 30% of that,
Okay,
30
well,
to
the
33%.
difference in the revenue from the partners appeared to be about 370,000. So I can understand 100,000, we're still $250,000 off.
Tiffany?
Yeah,
you
and I
wanna-
think also in 2011, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was also an adjustment from the previous year. And so, did that hit the books in 2011?
In the year, the give back?
Let's
Yeah.
get the real
reconcile.
expert around the table.
Well, Tiffany works on the
Tiffany's the-
allocation model, so
She runs the details on the fire
give you
contract.
the,
I was saying that with a smile.
That wouldn't be a change from the 11 budget, that wouldn't be in the 370, that would be buried in here. In actions, this is versus budget. So that shouldn't work.
this is Tiffany Hooton, our senior accountant.
For the fire partner calculation, it's not as easy as you would think it would be to come up with the revenue side that comes from the partners. One fund that kind of has to do with the calculation itself is the EMT fund. The EMT fund went down about $200,000, which also affects the revenues that we get from the partners. So that kind of has to do with why the revenues are down in 2012 as opposed to 2011. So you've got a combination of the overtime related to Medic 16, Fund 43, and then the change in Fund 46, the permit plan, where we're combining it with the general fund.
And we can always provide you Tiffany's worksheets if you'd like to see those calculations.
And maybe a few words to go along with it instead of just the numbers would be helpful.
Yeah,
Who would like to have that other than Councilman Cernanik? The calculations, the worksheets? Be happy to get them to you. Dr. Cole will be happy to get them to you.
And hopefully you understand the question, which is, you talked about costs going down, but it looks like the
Sure,
expenditures are going up.
it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
When you look at it on the face of it, it's counterintuitive. So that's why Tiffany can send out, and we sit down, and I can tell you, these are scrutinized extensively by the partners. So Tiffany gets a lot of people looking over her shoulder in terms of her worksheets on this, but we're happy to share her worksheets, and she can give you her assumptions, and for those of you who like that kind of stuff, we'll be happy to get it to you.
And it's also one of those things that ends up carrying forward in other discussions, so. trying to
Yes, sir.
understand.
Yep, your point well made.
I was just going to add in, and Tiffany mentioned something that jogged my memory when we were talking. The Fire Protection District at the last board meeting did in fact talk quite a bit about how much the auto aid agreement with South Metro on EMT services was actually, there was a lot of activity. Most of it was from South Metro into the Protection District, as opposed to the other direction. So essentially, while it was good quality service through the auto aid, it was essentially lowering EMT revenues. So that was something they did in fact talk about in terms of, you know, acknowledging that that was happening, which I forgot to mention when you and I were chatting.
And that's why I left the revenue budget the same for Fund 43, because I don't know how that's going to, like Stallman said, was to affect the revenues in 2012. I mean, it does have an effect on that, and it also affects the amount of revenues that we get from the partners, because whatever credits we receive, whatever EMS revenues, they're shared amongst all three partners.
Okay, John's done a very good job answering these questions so far.
Yes, counsel. Anything else?
Anything else on 108?
I had warned John that it was probably an accounting question.
Yes,
112.
that'll work.
Wait.
115. $119.
Bingo.
Okay?
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna, well, I guess it is technically, all right, maybe we haven't quite got there yet, or maybe I'm thinking more training, but it popped into my head, so I can, all right, let me just ask a couple quick questions.
Okay.
It's actually, one question is on 122 and one is on, gonna be on 128.
Good. That moves us ahead.
Huh? Yeah.
Okay?
No slowing down.
122. Question.
The overtime, Chief, the overtime issues you've got on 6020-097. We're budgeting $330,000 for just Medic 16 overtime, I guess, plus another 25 for other overtime. At what point does it make sense for you guys, and have you guys considered where's the break point in terms of an incremental FTE versus continuing to pay overtime that I assume is what, time and a half?
Yes, Councilmember Stallman, we did have that discussion with the budget team. There were a couple of scenarios that we presented, given the amount of overtime that we're spending and where we might better spend that with full-time equivalents. And I believe that the budget team came back with a recommendation that we would not make an adjustment for this next year. But we are, and we will continue to evaluate that, because I know there's got to be some kind of break over point where it's actually cheaper, it's actually better to hire FTEs rather than continue to pay the overtime. And we'll continue to look at that.
Okay, all right.
One of the things that hampered us, or that gave us caution, is that we cut 39% from our overtime for this year. And we're still waiting to see how we're going to end up at the end of this year, which is several months off. But we'll continue to scrutinize that.
All right, I think I'd encourage that, I guess. The other question I had, I guess it's a combination of the stuff on well, maybe it's not 117. Maybe it is. Some on 117 and then stuff on 128. There's some other, I don't know, just a variety of incremental equipment replacements and so forth and so on. We had talked, and there's somewhere in here, I think it's either capital or special revenue funds, where I think the schedule has the burn building upgrade in 2013 as far as the planning is concerned. And it was $200,000 if it sticks in my head.
Yes, sir.
Does it make sense to accelerate that expenditure and defer some of these other items? And I'm not laying my hands on it, but just, you know, some of the stuff that maybe would be nice to have versus absolutely need to have, because I guess I'd kind of think the burn building and doing the modular upgrades and enhancing that facility from a training perspective might be a need to have.
Well, I'll let Chief, and I think I was looking for your question here, but it was basically things about like replacing hoses, those
Well-
kinds of things. Was there sort of a qualitative trade-off to maybe defer some of those and try to accelerate the burn building? The policy issue I'll point out, and the Chief can talk about the specifics of the equipment, is, one of the reasons we've deferred the burn building is one of our major partners there, Inglewood, has indicated that they simply do not have any money to bring to the table at this point in time. So we're hoping at some point in time, maybe their budget situation gets better. We are moving ahead with some other improvements down there in terms of drainage and environmental issues and doing some other kind of workarounds. But that gap with Inglewood having absolutely no ability to come to the table has been an issue for us.
I'm going to assume the answer to this is it won't work, but I assume there's not any particular way to take their share of the burn building upgrade and get them to pay for an equivalent amount of incremental sewer plant costs. Since, I mean, there's joint ownership of both
Yeah, well,
entities.
given that they're both operated as, the sewer plant's operated as utility, my
I
guess
think
is
that-
their finance department would have trouble.
Well, the auditor would have a stroke.
Just asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll let Chief Mullen respond to your general question about, some of the equipment replacement that you've asked about.
Well, we certainly need a burn building. And right now, as Jim mentioned, we are working on the drainage down there, so all of the debris and the contaminants don't flow into the river. That should be done by the end of this year. And that would clear the way then to construct a modular-type burn building. But we're still waiting, of course, on the Inglewood share and try to do some kind of a workaround with that. As far as deferring some of the purchases that we put in this budget for some of the equipment, to tell you the truth, there isn't much want to have in here. Just like all the other departments, this is pretty much need to have.
Wait, and what's the one to have that's in here I can't resist?
Hey, that was pretty good.
For him, much meant zero.
Look at that.
Okay, questions on 119?
I have a quick follow-up on Bruce's question about the overtime. So you said that the budget committee decided that we hadn't reached that tipping point? What was it that how do you factor that? How do you, what's the?
Well, Chief did bring us a few different scenarios and a few different options to look at, and the budget team thoroughly reviewed those, but just speaking from my perspective, it seemed like we didn't have a great deal of confidence in some of those projections and cost reductions to be realized in the future, and there were just a few too many variables, and to create by hiring permanent personnel, we just didn't have good enough data and reliance on the numbers right at this point in time. And I can
That's
let
the real key
Phil
is
and
the trigger
Jim
point.
talk about that.
Because once you reach that trigger point and you instruct the chief and the team to go hire 6 full-time firefighters, you are taking off on a significant commitment of staff, time, and resources. It's an arduous task to go out and recruit and train those people.
But if
So
you do-
once you bring those,
But if you do 2 and you can offset it with incremental overtime savings, aren't you sort of cost neutral?
Yeah, but
Well, let me take a quick shot at some of this, which is recognize when you have a full-time equivalent as opposed to overtime, now you have
Oh, yeah, you got
other
bennies.
costs. You're going to have bennies and training.
Sure.
and
But you got
housing.
time and a half on overtime.
Understand that, but
Yeah, but-
your typical benefit ratio is somewhere around 40 to 60%. So,
I would think you'd increase a risk factor, though, particularly with first responders, where you've got somebody working longer than an 8-hour day or longer than a
I'm not-
regular shift. So you could increase liability on their use of benefits too.
Understood. I didn't look
I
at the
would,
detail.
I
was
guess
just
I
saying
would
it.
just
No, I
encourage us not to say, we're not gonna look at this until next year. I mean, I think if there's a better way to put together numbers or a better way to, if you didn't like what you got, I mean, can we work on a little more? $300,000 in overtime does seem to me to be, there is somewhere there that we can fix that. I mean, even if it doesn't eliminate it, like Bruce says, if it's adding 2 people and still keeping some overtime, but somehow
I
reducing some costs.
think this is going to be a study session, because running 24/7 shifts and how we have to slot it into, you're going to want to hear from your HR person. Yes, ma'am, we can certainly do that, and the staff can give you their best. Our professional judgment right now is it's not time to pull the trigger, but we can certainly give you more detail on how we calculate the staffing for the 6 full-time people and what the break point is that.
What would trigger you? What would pull the trigger?
I think if, in my judgment now, and Mr. Cortese and Mr. Farman and the other people, would be to see a more clear trend line that we were holding down those other overtime costs. So that you knew, like I said, once you jump off and go recruit those 6 people, then it's hard turning back. If you'd say, well, oh, excuse me, that didn't work out the way we wanted, well, you know, once they've gone and done that, you've invested a significant amount of time and resources to then say, well, shoot, we missed an assumption. So, but certainly it's a legitimate request to ask for more detail. I'm sure the team would be happy to do that. Anybody else want to comment on it? Chief Mullen?
I just have a question.
Okay.
Hey, Chief, so the 6 people, are they interchangeable?
I'm sorry, the 6 people
Are they interchangeable? Kind of like
Are they
cookies?
interchangeable with,
I mean, can any one of them do all the things? I mean,
yes, ma'am. If I was charged to go out and hire 6 or go out and hire 3, they would be firefighters that we would then either train or seek those firefighters that are medics. Just to let you know, we do have some openings right now, and we'll be hiring. And the people that we're going after this go-around will be medics. That's who we're looking for. We've, as you probably know, we've had a number of retirees. Our paramedic force is getting older, and we need to replenish the paramedic side of it. So that's what we're going to be going after, and that's what I'd be looking at if you gave me the go-ahead today to look for 3 or 6. I'd be going out for medics.
How much of the overtime is being driven by the openings?
Pretty much all of it. I mean, if we,
Oh, really?
well,
There's 2 different.
we have been extremely blessed this year in that we've had very few significant injuries. We've had compared with following previous years, very little use of sick time. So we've been blessed that way. Now we start off short, just about every shift. We're able to cover that with our existing people, but yeah, it makes a difference, obviously.
Bruce, I really think there's a lot of other factors to take into consideration, going from just covering the overtime to other things that have been on the table in the past. I really think we should probably get the partners involved and talk about a study session and think this through. I don't think making any decision.
Yeah, that's fine.
Plus, I think we're mixing our figures of speech. I think pull the trigger is something we use at the police department.
That's true.
I think we'd have to do
I
turn on
have-
the nozzle.
How about squirt the nozzle?
Squirt, yeah.
I have another question. We did through our Tabor vote, that there was $100,000 that we appropriated the Tabor money for the burn building. So we have the money to put into that building right now. And I guess we're into our 2nd or 3rd year of that sitting there. Is there, probably to the chief mostly, is there anything we can do with that $10,000, knowing that, Inglewood isn't going to be able to come up with theirs maybe anytime soon, maybe ever, that would help improve it? Because it would seem to me that 100,000, did I just say 10,000? $100,000, add a zero, would certainly, you could make some benefit of that now. And I'd just as soon see us spend it, because it's there specifically designated exclusively for that. Because I mean, I don't think we should wait for Inglewood to come to the table with it. If they do, then a year later or so, we have another $100,000. Can you spend it now? That's a silly question.
Council, I can spend any money that you send my way. No problem.
All right.
Care to rephrase that question?
And I'm
That
not
was a
limited,
gift.
I'm not limited to
That
100,000
was a-
either. I mean, as a matter of fact, we can certainly research that. What we are waiting for, as has been pointed out here, 100,000 from the city, 100,000 from the Fire Protection District. They've set aside that money too. We were looking at a plan that it would probably cost somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000 to create a burn building down there that uses either natural gas or propane, which is better for the environment, which is actually makes for a more efficient burn exercise. But if it's $100,000, I can spend that. I can spend that after researching and seeing how best to either fix up what we have, or make some kind of improvements, and incorporate at least some of the natural gas or propane stuff that we can do. We can certainly look at that.
Maybe we can include that in the study session then.
And maybe we could loan the money to Englewood under terms.
You could do that, and if the council wants to spend money unilaterally, we can give you options to do that. We'll just, as long as you understand the context is that the other partners, they participate in the training down there, they get the benefit of that, but as long as you're comfortable going ahead, if the chief gives you options and you're comfortable going ahead and spending money unilaterally, that's certainly options that the chief and his team can give you.
I think what you probably ought to do is twist the arm of some of the Inglewood Council people, get them to come up with $100,000.
That's not enough.
Pardon?
But that's not enough.
That's their part of it. Their part. That's their part.
Well, while you're out twisting arms, chief can be working on his
So
options.
we have 100, the fire partners have 100, Inglewood has 100, you're up to the 300.
Well, you know what we've done in the past too, is that we get like a proposal that says if I had 100,000, I could do this. If I had 200, I could do this.
Sure.
300, I could do that. So maybe it's something that shows us that, and that.
Incremental.
would- Yeah, and that would, I mean, I don't have any problem bringing it up at the next Tri-Cities, or, we can talk to Inglewood about that, but gives us something to really work with and go off of.
Okay. Questions on page 130?
130.
136. Thank you, John.
Oh, wait a second.
Thank you. Oh.
One question. Didn't finish it. John, taking a look at the 2012 budget versus where we stand in 2011, just to kind of get it out on the table, what's the impact to service that you would see between 2011 and 2012, based on the budget? Same, different, less, and where?
Somebody pick up the phone and call 911, they're going to get the same service next year as they did this year. Somebody call my staff and ask for a question, it's going to be a while before I get back to you. It's just the way it works. Now, I've cannibalized my staff in order to put more people out in the field. And because of that, my staff, what's left of them, is working harder. I'm certainly not whining about it, I'm not complaining about it, I'm just saying, folks, your citizens, our citizens call for help, and they're going to get good help just like they always have. You give my office a call and ask for data. It's going to be a couple weeks. That's the way it works.
Well, we'll schedule that study session a few months out.
Cool.
In
You've got
between his motorcycle trips.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Any questions for public service? Okay, library.
Actually, hold the phone.
We knew we couldn't get by with that.
Public service.
Did we skip public service?
No, I asked you if you had any questions.
He didn't go by pages, he just did the.
You almost got off, Shirley.
164.
Hang on.
Worth a shot.
I did want to ask Charlie,
In answer to Ms. Brinkman's question, if you give me the money, I'll find a way to spend it.
That's a carte blanche from Charlie, he'll guarantee it.
Even if you don't give them the money, you'll find a
Exactly.
way to spend it.
we've got, oh, where's all the details in here? Where's this?
I know where you live.
Yes, I know. I'm your buddy here, I'm your pal. The street maintenance budget,
Hey,
I guess it's 152. But maybe, Charlie, maybe it's $2.5 million. But I'm only seeing, say, 260,000 in asphalt and paving materials, and that's not the total, is it?
The rest of it's in the 34 fund.
Oh, okay, right, special
Special
projects,
projects,
okay. So it's sort of a combination of the two. I guess the question ultimately is, I think you guys have done a great job over a period of time of trying to stay on top of certainly some of the major streets and arterials, the Littleton Boulevards, the Windermere's, Mineral Avenue, so forth and so on. Some of the older streets, particularly north of Ridge, that have been around since the 50s or 40s or 60s or whatever, are getting to the point, and we know this, that we get complaints from citizens, and we have to do these on a piecemeal basis. So I guess the ultimate question is, maybe for a study session, again, it's a tipping point problem. When do you get to the point where you've got enough deterioration in the substructures of your streets that aren't major arterials, but are these neighborhood intersections? And you and I have talked about a number of these where they're just deteriorating and they get patched up as best they can, but it's a Band-Aid type of deal. Someday we're gonna have to figure out how to actually rebuild a bunch of side streets. And at the same point in time, we'll be continuing to do the major intersections and the major arterials. How much do we really need to start getting our head around in terms of money to do the job right, so that we're not just continuing to throw Band-Aids on stuff, which is good, but sort of in some respects isn't really what we should be doing?
The budget pages that you refer to here is for the street maintenance work mainly within residential and side streets, which is what you're referring to, where we do rotomill and overlay. Those kind of streets we can do within this budget and keep up. However, there are side streets in Littleton, and I'm going to give you, I think is the best example, is Bemis, south of Littleton Boulevard, is probably a residential street that is the worst in Littleton. And that's a complete rebuild. When we do rebuilds, it's in the 34 fund, as City Manager Woods indicated. We have about $1.2 to $1.3 million that we use from the HUTF revenue in order to fund that. In answer to your question, Bruce, the situation is this: how much more money can we spend each year without adding a lot of administration costs? In other words, without adding personnel and increasing consulting fees so high that it begins to become a separate life of its own, how many more millions can we spend each year with existing resources? Right now, we're at about 1.3 million a year in street contract rehabilitation. That means complete removal of the street and rebuilding it. We think we can more than double that with existing staff. So if you were to give us another 1.8 to $2 million a year, using existing staff and existing consultants, we could manage that in order to rebuild the streets in Littleton. Now, you ask, how many years are we going to have to do that? It's almost never ending. And that is, it takes, we build our streets for a 20-year life cycle. And within that 20 years, we should apply a slurry seal to each of the streets. We should rotomill and overlay them once. And then try to get them to last 30 years, do some more maintenance, and it'll get them to last another 10 years. So you want a street that lasts 40 to 50 years before you have to totally rebuild it. Strip it off down to the base and start all over again. But we do 20 years. Are we keeping up to that 20-year program? No, we are not. And if we were to do the Bemis streets, Eladi from Littleton Boulevard to Cayley, Jameson and Windermere and Southbridge, portions of Broadway right now that need to be rebuilt, we can only manage upwards of about $3.5 million a year before we would have to add staff. And that's what I would like to avoid, is being able to have to say, okay, we're going to spend more money on administration than we are currently doing.
Thanks.
But even to get to that amount of money, there's going to have to be a revenue source that we have not yet identified.
Yes, sir. Unless you're going to take it, unless you're going to divert it from other city operations, you'll need a new revenue source.
But I mean, this is sort of the issue, and maybe, again, it's another study session topic. I mean, the problem, it's not a problem that's gonna go away. These things continue to be aging, they continue to be, in need of rebuild. And we see, we all see them. I mean, there's certainly, and as you get done doing chunks of neighborhoods, others are gonna start coming of age. So it's an issue.
Legislature gave us the ability a couple years ago to put tolls on roads. We could toll Broadway. Put some gates right at County Line, some other booths right at Bellevue.
He's not running for.
Yeah,
Hence the study session.
think outside the box.
Well, back at, we did have,
C470.
we had a surge. We actually did a tremendous amount of street construction between 1995 and 2000, when we had a surge of building use tax and general use tax money, mainly driven by the Quest redevelopment of the 600,000 square feet down in South Park. The $15 million renovation of the riverfront.
And maybe that's the issue with when a
But
marathon.
given the outlook, you're probably looking at, the 2 million that Charlie wants right now in our current property tax base, you'd need around 3.3 mils to raise that kind of money, or you'd probably need about 0.25% sales tax, just off the top of my head.
And Jim will tell you that this is a problem across the state and across the metro area. I mean, I've heard Don Hunt give the speech on how much money CDOT gets, how much of that is already allocated to paying off bonds. I think he said he had, $120 million left each year to spend on, after he gets done with maintenance and with bond payments. He has about $120 million that he can spend all across the state for transportation projects.
Well, I do think we should put it up there for study session. Don't you?
Earlene is heading to the board.
It's okay. Any other questions for public service?
I've got to ask the question that is perennial in my council district every year. And is, do you have any money in there for replacement of fencing?
Yes. Replacing of fences that the city owns? Yes.
I just didn't say city-owned, I
Yeah,
said fencing.
Page
not the fence.
150.
Yeah, you've asked it every year, and here's one thing we've been consistent on. For the fence you're talking about, no. Until you can get 3 other votes on this council. The whole time Charlie and I have known you, which is now going on 25 years, you've never been able to get 3 other votes.
Now, if you want to ask somebody who's still here after October 1st, I'll give you the real.
You gonna give him a different answer after October 1st? I
I
doubt.
want a landing page, we should talk.
I don't know, I may be able to twist a few arms between now and October 1st.
Go for it, Jim. 3 more votes is all it takes.
We have a minor amount in the street budget on page 132 that has a fence replacement cost in there, not 153, that we use for replacement sections of fence,
Where people run into it.
yeah, such as you've seen on Bowles Avenue.
Yes, that's, I know.
Don't get any ideas.
Not my car.
All right, community development. Thank you, Charlie.
I've got a couple.
Okay.
Sorry. Glenn, 3 quick questions. You talked about on 163 your significant budget changes in the departmental reorg. If memory serves, last year, there was some question as to whether at least one of the departmental positions that maybe had been temporary was gonna be maintained. So I guess talk about the value of the reorg relative to maintaining the staff position, and beyond just efficiencies, are there demonstrable cost savings?
Well, we have a great staff of community development, I've learned that, and what they lack in quantity, they make up for in quality. So from the reorg standpoint, one of the things that I've noticed is it's a very flat organization, and that means 95% of the staff either directly report to me or Jim Thielen. We have a lot of specialists, and then we have about 25% that are either 1/2 time or 3/4 time. So I guess from an efficiency standpoint, it reduces our responsiveness to people asking questions, trying to solve problems, because everybody kind of is hanging in their little world, and they're waiting to get an answer from Jim or me. So that's one of the things I really wanted to fix. So from I would say a customer service standpoint, I think we would benefit a great deal. Now, what I propose is really creating teams, and that would kind of solve the issue with people kind of staying in their specialization, putting people that have a very similar job together and try and find efficiencies with that. What we're proposing is to pay for the one position we're actually asking to upgrade, to get rid of that flatness. I think that we're looking at a cost of about $20,600, and we want to balance that with a reduction in our consulting fees. I think at least the last 2 years, we've been running about $100,000 where we've relied on consultants to do some of our larger planning projects. I think the benefit of moving that position from a temporary community development director into a senior planner, that's where we get that savings. Now we have that horsepower in more of an advanced planning role, and we can back off the consultant dollars. I think we like that because we can control a little bit better, and I think we can be a little bit more responsive to all the boards and commissions. I think we have 4 boards and commissions that we serve. At least 2 of those have a very aggressive work plans for us. So we're trying to maintain that and not add any FTEs. So hopefully that answers that question. Or
Bruce, can I follow?
Sure, go for it.
An advanced planning division led by the reclassification of a current position to principal planner. I don't understand that. So you're going to create a division, an advanced planning division, that'll be led by?
our current long-range planner, who is now a senior planner. And then the other folks would be another senior planner. So we're trying to get a reporting situation there. And also, we have a part-time neighborhood coordinator. So for me, that made sense, and we could have called it long-range planning. I kind of have a bias against that because people say, well, it's the Lone Ranger. I try and stay away from that. And advanced planning is both. It's kind of the longer range, 10, 20 years, but it's also strategic planning, which might be, doing plans for neighborhood improvement in a 1 to 3 year time period. So it's a little bit of both.
So, just putting names to this, Dennis would be the
Principal planner.
principal planner. So he would be in charge of the advanced planning division.
Right.
And then Jan would work,
No.
oh,
Jan is a principal planner. She would be in charge of current planning.
okay.
And then we would move our zoning administrator, who is Pam Hall, underneath Jan. She's already at that level where she has responsibility over supervisory responsibility. So the only change to a position would be Dennis's position from senior planner to principal planner. And then Andrea would report to him, as well as Mark Behrens. So historic preservation would move out of administration and move into advanced planning.
So historic pres goes out of planning into advanced planning.
It's actually under administration. So historic
Oh.
preservation actually reports directly to me now. And I would move that
So
to
what are you gonna be
Dennis.
doing?
Actually, that's another reason I think we can reduce consultant dollars. And that's some of my expertise is in long-range planning. It gives us an opportunity to do some things like look at performance measures for our plan review and permitting process. So there are, I think you'll also get a little bit more horsepower out of your director as well.
Sorry, Bruce.
No, that's great, no problem. On page 164, I would like to maybe stick up on the whiteboard that we take some of the parking lot rental savings and see about adding, maybe approaching Greg Reinke and adding back maybe 5 or 6 handicap parking spaces sort of in his lot, because there has been communication from a number of folks about the lack of handicap parking that doesn't have the curb constraints that we have on Main Street. And I don't know what that would cost.
Can I recommend that instead of tying that specifically to Rinky or any one specific lot, that the council request a study session on how to address handicap parking
Yep,
in
that'd be
general?
fine. Yeah, that'd be fine. The key to it is, it's gotta be, from an accessible standpoint, you've got side curbs and with people trying to exit off to the side that
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I saw some of those things, and I think those are valid concerns.
Sure. And then I guess the last question I had, Glenn, is on 166, you've got 23,850 additional projects, i.e. downtown parking inventory, which I kind of thought was done, so I'm assuming your additional projects is something other than that?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked that question, because perhaps parking inventory isn't a good way to classify what I was thinking about. Actually, Kelly did a great job of counting all the spaces that are out there. What we did, and actually, the city did a pretty extensive study in 2004 on parking. And what I'm proposing is actually doing more of a survey of how those spaces are used and when. And then tying that to get an accurate count of the amount of square footage for different uses. So I think what staff can do is build a pretty good parking model on the downtown. So when we have issues of a new use coming in and there's no parking available, I think we can give you a little bit better educated answer as far as.
Give you a baseline to be able to monitor that over time.
Right, right.
All right, thanks.
I think that's important for starting to address the parking requirement, which is triggered in downtown, unless you're historically preserved, like Charlie. All right, library. I'm sorry, any more questions for community development?
Thank you, Glenn.
Well, I did have one on behalf of other boards. And I know your boards do a whopping amount of work, at least some of them. But we have board and commission dinner, so what's the 250 for your boards?
Oh, actually, the staff and the commissioners, as a commissioner is leaving, they present them with their own proclamation. So I know the council does it. I think we also, from a staff standpoint, and the other commissioners, provide a frame certificate to that member as well. So it's kind of our best guess of what that would be. We certainly don't know when commissioners are leaving or staying, but that's what we use it for. And then also the Historic Preservation Board gives out awards as well, and that $250 would help pay for that.
And so that's for covering all your boards when people leave midterm or something?
Yes.
Oh, I do, that's fine with me for that, but I think maybe the same should go for other boards. I don't know how often we would have that, to do that.
Well, we actually do that during the annual,
I know, but that's
Board
what I'm trying
meeting.
then to see what they're doing.
We still invite the people who leave the boards midterm. We invite them to the Boards and Commissions dinner and provide them with a plaque or whatever.
Aren't his folks gonna get 2 things, 3 things, 4 things?
potentially, yes.
It sounds like we just developed a tradition of the planning commission kind of doing their own thing. If you don't want them to continue that, then why 250?
Well, actually,
My thought was other folks should get the same. I didn't say stop that, I just,
We have the plum boards and commissions in our department, so.
and then I think the amount of time that the planning commission puts in and that they've been working for the last couple of years, I think that's the least we can do for them.
well, I would think they would deserve more, but anyway.
Yeah.
And Glenn, just a footnote, one of my expectations, whether you fit it in one of your performance measures, is with that additional horsepower from the director's position is going after grants or opportunities to have OPM be able to fund some of the projects rather than having to directly use those consulting costs.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually in my notes, I wrote OPM. Phil brought it up yesterday, other people's money, and yes, particularly in historic preservation, I think we've been pretty successful in using other people's money to do the work of historic preservation here, so.
Well,
Good
huge
point, thank you.
kudos to you for dinging into that consulting budget. It's always bothered me. Let's use our staff and put them in appropriate positions and quit hiring all these outside folks. I think that's great. Thanks for working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Timothy. To the hot seat, please.
When you started to skip public services, I thought maybe you were going to hand me Charlie's budget, and I also can spend his money, so. Let me pass out.
Seems to be a skill set with all the department heads.
You taught us well, Jim. Let me hand out responses to Councilmember Cole's questions that we got via email. I will have a second handout for you tomorrow. We didn't get everything quite done. Councilmember Cole, your question on page 178, I've got some additional response to that. It'll be coming tomorrow. And then while those are going around, I need to make a quick correction to the budget narrative. I know it's hard to believe that a history major would make a mistake with numbers, but it did. On page 184, under the item number 6, the interactive voice response system, the IVR, I accidentally monetized our volunteer hours into the return on investment, so I need to adjust that number for you. The last sentence that begins at current salary levels, the appropriate number, instead of $95,316, should be 41,028.
What page are you on?
184.
And just go to number 6.
We certainly think our volunteers are invaluable, but for this purpose, it wasn't appropriate to include those numbers.
So say again, 41,
I'm sorry.
41.
41,028.
Thank you.
So is the 1,833 wrong?
It is incorrect, that is 789.
But we still value them just as high.
Absolutely.
So Doug does finance and you do?
Questions about the library?
We'll check your numbers next.
Well, the numbers would actually be correct if we could, in fact, value put salary and benefits for volunteers, but.
So comment, rather, maybe question, comment combined.
Okay.
So I had asked for some information, and then I got some other information from Jim about things that were in some of this that are actually in the baseline. But I would like council to consider funding a couple of other things that are fairly inexpensive. But since I volunteer at the library, I have a little sense of how some of these things could really help the staff time. And let me see if I can get my brain and throat all connected here.
Peggy, try to talk closer to the mic.
Sorry. That'll rumble more. So, for example, on 181, can you hear now?
You move the mic.
Now can you hear?
There
Okay,
you go.
I'll hold this puppy up here and then I can't read the book, but okay. And I'll try not to cough into the mic. On 181, number 7. That one, I've lost my sheet. Is that?
You want these on the board?
Well, maybe we put them up there if they're not in the baseline. Is that one in?
This is the advanced purchase, the advanced events program for $1,900, Dr.
Yes.
Cole?
Yes, and I misplaced what you just gave me at the beginning of the meeting. But 1,900, this is allowing people to register for things without talking to people. They just can call up and make
Yes, ma'am.
selections, right?
Call up or do it via computer, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems to me for that amount, that's a significant load off of staff to have to go through phone calls and so forth. Item 8, the Consultant for Time Matters program is $2,000. And that one relates to filing and schedule, is a filing and scheduling software package and providing LIRC staff training. Currently, the staff is using 5 software platforms, making multiple entries of the same information. Now, I know since I help in the interlibrary loan area, the woman in charge of that has done some things, made recommendations that have indeed eliminated some of the multi-entry stuff.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
this-
Several of the things that Barb, that you're talking about emerged from the efficiency study, and those were exactly the things we were
Yeah.
able to implement without any
But
cost attached to them.
This is 2,000, but again, if I figured it right, it's close to a 0.2 FTE. And that's a significant release, depending on time of day, to help with other functions.
Well, you're right, and particularly with regards to the second item, the LIRC, the Littleton Immigrant Resource Center, is staffed by 1.5 FTEs. So this, the goal of this is to streamline the bureaucratic process. As you might imagine, it is extremely paperwork-driven, application-driven. So more time away from the bureaucratic portion of it means more time on client services.
Then I think the purchase labels to interfile library interfile fiction, that one is not in the baseline, I think. That's only $500. But, and Tim says no cost savings, and he doesn't mention time savings, but I also have taken things that come in the library chute, and that someone else is sitting aside there after they've re-entered them, and then you put them on the cart. Well, if you have to look at different kinds of fiction when you're putting them there, it slows you down, as opposed to just alphabetizing all fiction. So-
You are right about that. I did ask, after our meeting last week, I did ask the division heads at the library to take a look at those numbers again, and they do feel that there will be very limited cost savings in that area, but there may be some, it would certainly be a minimum number, though.
Well, and, but you've seen, and I've seen all the books stacked up in there that any more that we can help free people up so they can do shelving till we get the.
That is the area, that is the primary area of bottleneck.
And
Vicki, can I just, I don't want to go too far, but if we look at number 8, Tim, if indeed the benefit is not as much in the area of salary savings, but it's in services that can be provided, I would suggest you might take a look at restating that rather than talking about the benefit in salary savings, which would say, hey, if you do have the salary savings, spend the money and get the salary savings and you have a self-funded project, okay? But if it's in what the real objective is to provide services in a way, make the benefit statement in terms of services.
I think that's an excellent point, Councilman. That actually is one I wish I had rewritten or written a little bit differently, because the goal on that one in particular is to give the 1.5 FTEs in LIRC more time on client and less time on the bureaucratic side. So you're right. It's not actually accurate probably to state that in terms of salary savings, because it would be repurposing those staff hours.
And that's a good bit of the focus of why I'm making these various arguments. I'm sorry. I also think that we could spring for the $1,000 for the 2 laser printers unless we think we could get them from foam.
Just to address all of these items, council member, I would never turn down additional money from the city council, but the city manager and I did have a visit before we put together the final budget narrative and before he made his recommendations, and we did identify a number of these items that could potentially come out of the Friends of the Library and Museum budget when we put that together in February of next year. So I certainly appreciate and will not turn down any money, but I did want to note that Jim and I did talk about some of these items being pretty prime for Friends funding.
And so then let me ask about the foam money.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you put it in a pot in a given year or 2 years so that you have a bigger chunk to use?
Well, we do an annual budget much the way we do with the city. We essentially, the Friends, each year, at the beginning of the year, they will look at the previous year's fundraising successes, and they will determine what amount of grant they're going to give to each the library and the museum. Generally, in my 10 years, it's been somewhere from anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 in that ballpark. I will tell you, and I know you and I visited about this, but just for the other council members' benefit, generally speaking, somewhere between 60 and 70% of that goes to public programming. Both the library and museum lack line items in their city budget to cover programming, special event-type programming. On the museum side, we do cover educational programming out of the city's line items, but we do not cover any of the concerts or things of that sort, and the same is exactly true with the library. So the bulk of that money goes towards public programming for the citizens, but the balance can be used for other areas. In some cases, we have backfilled areas where the city was not able to fund us. In other areas, we have specific projects that we feel are good matches for Friends money, since it's essentially community money. So that's pretty much how we put it together.
Well,
you can carry over money from one year into the next. That is one difference between the city and the Friends. The Friends are a 501c3 organization, a nonprofit organization, so they have allowed us to accumulate carryover money from previous years, and so you can at times accumulate that into a substantial enough amount that you could put it towards a more pricey project.
Well, or maybe the city could then afford a portion to supplement. Wouldn't have to save for 100 years, maybe.
We have always tried to be very careful to keep city funding and Friends funding separate and not combine the two, but that's been the practice for many years, but we could certainly take a look if there's something specific you have in mind.
The Friends still blaming everything on the Bulgarians?
Always.
Then about the credit card interface, that I think is not on the baseline, is it?
It is in the baseline.
It is? Okay. I'm
Special
sorry.
projects, yeah.
I've got too many pieces of paper here. Now, this one is a chunk, and I don't think it's in, but maybe it is. The interactive voice response system.
It is not in the baseline, no, ma'am.
And that's number 6 on page 184. I guess part of me would, if we really do start generating some nice revenue next year, that we might think about a special request or something. Either that or see if we could get grant money or something else, because that's a pretty time-consuming one. But anyway, that's enough unless somebody else sees
I believe,
one.
Councilmember Cole, I believe the interactive voice response system is on the capital improvements plan. It is slated for 2013 at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. Jim?
Tim, it's an answer I should already have, but I don't remember. Do you use automatic sorters for returned library materials?
We do not. You'll find that item in the capital improvements plan. It is slated for 2013 also. It would be a combination of radio frequency ID, which is the system for checking in and checking out the books, and the sorter then to manipulate those books into the appropriate bins. So that is a substantial investment. That is the single biggest dollar item that has emerged from the efficiency study. It's around $330,000. We've got a couple of different estimates in, so that's a good ballpark number. But that is by far the largest item that we'd be looking at. It is also the one that would give us the opportunity to realize the most efficiency. The main challenge that we're working with right now at the library is closing the gap between demand and resources. Right now, as the graphs in the narrative will indicate, essentially the demand is going like this and resources are going like this. At some point, that gap is going to be too great to close. So what we have looked at throughout the efficiency study that we just completed are ways to close that gap by implementing technology, and Ken Price, our IS director, was the facilitator for that. So he's been intimately involved in all of these discussions. But what we're looking at is implementing a technology tool that will allow us to combine that with our existing human resources and close that gap over the next 5 years. If we do that, we can close that. We can retain the level of service that we're providing to the community right now. If we don't do that, we will get to the point at some point where we're not going to be able to close that gap, and we will be looking at reduction of service levels, a reduction of the services that are expected at this point, or that we've been able to provide over the years.
That's not made by the same company that did the baggage system for United at DIA, is it?
It is not. But that's an excellent question, Mr. Mayor.
Otherwise, the books may never show up.
What's your turn?
All right, any more questions for the library?
Well, since Tim's here, this question relates to library and museum. Number of FTE volunteers.
The museum side is about 3.5, a little bit over 3.5. The library side, I think, Phyllis, are we about 2.75? About 2.75 on the library side.
And how much is that if we hired people in salary and bennies?
You know, that's a good, I'm not sure
ballpark.
exactly how to monetize that, but I would say on the museum side, probably around 90,000-ish, and maybe 75, 80,000 on the library side.
So, I mean, we're talking, and I wanted.
That might be a little bit on the conservative side,
Yeah,
but I
and
would
I
say that's.
wanted this in public because that's a tremendous contribution.
Absolutely.
From those incredible volunteers. And the museum volunteers need a little more training because of the kinds of things most of them do. Library folks, depending on what they're volunteering, not quite so much training, but.
I think there's a fair amount of training on both sides of the street, but I will certainly agree with you. We could not provide the service levels on either side of the street that we do without our volunteer cadre. They really are in both departments, they are absolutely critical to be able to reach the service levels that we've been able to provide. Thank you.
Okay, museum. Questions for the museum or about the museum? Old questions about the museum. New questions.
Well, then are you coming tomorrow night? You're coming tomorrow night?
Yes, ma'am.
So we could potentially ask follow-up since I'm not a
sure.
speed reader of documents like you just gave us.
Absolutely.
I'll read it for tomorrow.
Okay.
Questions, all right, general ops. Thank you, Tim. General ops,
Just one general question on general ops.
226.
We moved a bunch of stuff in here, so who's got operational oversight from a cost control perspective of most of this stuff?
It's a variety of things. One of the budget team, I'll have you speak to that because we moved some pass-through items in here such as the street lighting and some other items. So I'll let Mr. Farman respond to that.
Sure, the budgetary oversight has not changed. For instance, we have the utilities that moved into general ops on page 228, electricity and gas and water sewer. So we still have Dave Stacy and his division monitoring those utility bills. It's just that those items we felt were non-discretionary for the most part, and so they were better located in general operations.
Telecommunications is monitored by Mike Schaefer and
Telecommunications, that's another one. And election, we did move that into general operations as well. That's one where we really don't have a lot of discretion controlling those costs.
But I do oversee.
Sure.
And Wendy oversees that.
Okay.
So we still have somebody,
So it's just a big bucket.
somebody is still a steward of those funds, that's right.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on general operations? Then that concludes the general fund. Thank you all, appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow night.
We're adjourned.
We have a 11-minute break.
For how long? One?
11 minutes. Don't go over.
So we're doing capital and special and the rest of it tomorrow.
Yeah. Wait, if we start capital,